Hi, church. I hope you're having a great August long weekend. And this is our teaching for what we call Sabbath Sunday. So, Chance, we did it on the July long weekend. We're doing this August long weekend. Is just an opportunity to pause, to rest. And really, the idea of Sabbath is to focus on God. And so we do that when we gather, but we want to take these couple of Sundays in the summer where maybe you can get into nature. Maybe it's with good conversation around the table with family, something about Jesus or what God's teaching you. But to take some moments and Sabbath this weekend. You'll hear some of the noises in my neighborhood, but I wanted to just get out here and share with you. And my question is, have you ever been hurt? And I don't mean like fall off your bike and skin your knee hurt. I'm talking about wounded in the heart, maybe. Something was said or something was done that cut deep. I think we all can answer yes. We've been wounded. We've been hurt. It's part of just being human. Is things are going to be said, things are going to be done that will hurt us. And so this summer we're looking at different stories that Jesus told. These stories we refer to as parables. Parables are stories that have a teaching or a message behind them. And often when Jesus told these stories, there was a reason, a question was asked, or a situation was presented to him, and instead of just, point A, point B, point C, and doing some teaching that way, he would tell a story. And it's no different. We're looking at a parable, and it's in Matthew chapter 18, starting in verse 21. And it starts off with this. And Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" There's Peter, he's thinking he's pretty good, like 7 times, 1 per day, like for the week, that's pretty good. How many times should I forgive others that have sinned against me? Isn't that our perspective, honestly? It's what has been done to us. What should I do for people that have hurt me? And then so Jesus tells a story. And he tells a story of somebody who had servants working for him, and he paid them, and somebody owed him a lot of money. Actually, it was about 20 years worth of salary. Think about it, 20 years of salary being in that much debt. That is crippling. That is like, how do you pay back 20 years worth of salary? How do you get into that kind of debt? That's a whole another story probably. And this man owes his master this much money, and the master comes to him and he's like, "Pay up. It is time to pay up." And he can't. He doesn't have the money available. And so what does the master do? He says, "Okay." And this was well within in the kind of the economic, political structure of how things were done in that day. He says, "Okay, then we're selling everything you have, and your kids, your wife, and you are going into slavery." And slavery is a bit different than what sometimes we have the picture. What that means is they no longer controlled where they worked or how they worked, and that money came to the master. And the person throws himself down at the master's feet. He knows 20 years worth of, this is unattainable to pay back. And so he begs for mercy. And Jesus says that the master has pity on him, and he forgives the whole debt. He just wipes it off the books. Can you imagine the relief? Can you imagine the emotion in that moment of just having that taken away? To me, the most likely equivalent I can think of in my life is if someone just said, "Hey, The mortgage on your house, it's paid off. It's done. I can't dance. I would probably do a little dance on the spot right there of just like excitement and joy. And then for this is even more so because I'm monthly paying down my mortgage. This guy was going to go into slavery. And so hopping his step, he's skipping down the road. And what does he do? He sees somebody who owes him money. It's like, wait a second, that guy owes me money. He owes me a day's wage, roughly. And he goes up to the guy and he says, hey, you owe me about a day's wage. And the gentleman's like, I know, but I'm just a little behind. I can't make my payments. Do you mind if I pay you back at a later time? And the person loses it. And he throws him in jail. He's like, no, you can't do this. And he throws him in jail and he says, you can't get out until you pay me back. And what happens? Word gets back to the master. And the master is upset. And this is how Jesus tells a story. Then the master called the servant in. This is verse 32. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay back all he owed. This is an uncomfortable story. And the message is pretty clear. See, we often, when a wrong's done to us, we think about the hurt and the wrong that's done to us. But Jesus is asking our first posture to be, how much have I been forgiven? Think about what God has forgiven you of. Think of your brokenness. Think of the way you've hurt others. Think of what you have done to others and how much you have been forgiven. Now, how would you act out of that posture? In other words, Jesus is saying, instead of stepping out and acting out of our hurt, you've done this to me, I'm hurting, you've done this to me, which is a true statement. What would be happening if our first step, our posture, is out of, man, I've been forgiven so much. Yes, you've still hurt me. Yes, we need to talk about this. But man, I have been forgiven so much. The posture of out of hurt or of your forgiveness, it really shapes, it really alters how you interact with that individual. Now, I want to make some things clear. Jesus is not saying forgive and forget. Like, you don't address the situation, you don't talk to the person. Oh, it's like nothing ever happened. That's not what Jesus is saying. The emotions that you're feeling are natural and normal. To be angry, to be hurt. These things are okay, and they're okay to express in a healthy way. But what Jesus is saying is retribution, vengeance, wanting a tit for tat in the sense of like, they hurt me, so I want them to hurt. That is not the posture of a follower of Jesus. The posture of a follower of Jesus is, I have been forgiven so much, so let me step into the situation, and how can I bring reconciliation? How can I bring peace? And depending what's been done to you, maybe that also means, you know what, I can't trust this person again. Let's use this story as an example. You can forgive someone and decide not to lend them money again because you think, you know what, they're not good on their promise to redeem back that gift. They're not going to pay me back. And so I forgive them. I don't want vengeance. I don't want any ill will for them. I want what's best for them. But I'm also not going to lend them any more money. That is forgiveness. That is okay. Forgiveness doesn't equal trust. It doesn't mean that you just forget everything. But for me, it's the last verse in this story that Jesus says that I find so challenging and haunting. And up to this point, it's been pretty challenging. It says this in verse 35 of Matthew 18. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. That person that was thrown in prison because they didn't forgive the debt of their fellow servant. Jesus is saying that's how God's going to treat us if we don't forgive others. The bar is set pretty high. It is a really no nonsense. There's no wiggle room here. Jesus is saying you must forgive others if you want to experience the forgiveness of God. One author described it this way. It's like breathing. Just like we all need to breathe, otherwise we die. We need to bring in there and then exhale there. And then inhale and then exhale. And for most of us, 99.9% of our breathing, we don't even think about. It just is natural. But if I breathe in that air and hold it in, well, I'm going to suffocate. I'm going to die. And the author described that act like the act of forgiveness. We need to breathe in the forgiveness of God and exhale forgiveness to others. And breathe in and exhale this forgiveness. But if we breathe in the forgiveness of God and try to hold it in, spiritually it's going to kill us. Our soul will die. And so we need to exhale forgiveness to others. And eventually, as we follow Jesus and he shapes our life, we'll start to notice that this inhaling the forgiveness of God and exhaling forgiveness on others starts to become a bit more natural and more natural and no more natural, to a point where we start to realize, man, I'm just forgiving people. It's my natural indication, my natural posture is to remind myself of how much God has forgiven me. So it only makes sense that I forgive others. It's that breathing in and breathing out. Like I said, I hope you have a great August-long Sabbath Sunday. And I just challenge you, whether it's reflecting on your own or discussing this with the people around you, but just maybe talk about this story, this parable that Jesus told, and what does it truly mean to forgive others? And that part of talking about how much God has forgiven us and how then we can breathe that out and forgive others. Take care, and I'll see you next Sunday.